kind of makes me think the AR-15 is a little bit of a ridiculous conversation when it comes to hunting.
Yeah, I also feel like just for the sake of hunting, granted I've never gone out hunting, obviously, but I feel like just for the sport of it, like how is it as much of a sport if you're just going out there and like spraying bullets all over the place? Like it isn't the whole point of hunting that you're supposed to be like this sharpshooter with skills that again, I've never hunted. I don't understand the joy in hunting, but to me it seems like you're cheating if you're using weaponry that's designed to be used in war.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of. I was never a fan of hunting. Never gone hunting myself either. But I had an uncle that was loved hunting. He would only hunt deer with a bow, and then he would go and hunt bear and boar with a rifle, a black powder rifle, where you basically have one shot and that's it. We used to joke with him, Uncle Bobby, why would you do this? And it was always, I want to give him a fighting chance. I'll have a couple shots with the bow. If I miss, it's time to run. Same with the black powder rifle.
Hmm.
But never understood that. And then the AR-15 is just a really poor choice as far as the hunting rifle is concerned too. And I think we always kind of focus on the rifle itself, but the ammunition that it uses is meant to damage the target. So once it enters the
Hmm.
body, it starts tumbling and it starts doing massive internal damage and goes and creates, a massive exit wound. If you're a hunter, that's not really what you want to do to a deer, to be completely honest. You don't want bullet fragments within a deer or anything like that. And again, it's one of those toys that the NRA will go back to. Hunting and self-defense. First two things that they'll always kind of bring up. And the AR-15 is not a weapon for that. I always kind of laugh at the self-defense piece. Drywall doesn't stop bullets. And if you're trying to defend your home with an AR-15, you're putting your family in just as much danger as the intruder is by using that weapon in a house.
Well, we've solved everything. We should just get rid of AR-15s. Right. I mean, I frankly would be in favor of just getting rid of guns altogether, but I appreciate the fact that there are people, especially in this country, who like their guns, and I'm willing to compromise if they are.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just the amount that's out there too. And I think that's the thing that scares everyone is just this country's inundated with the amount of guns. And it just doesn't seem necessary. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of veterans are speaking, the same truth that I'm speaking is we've seen the horror that these weapons can cause. And we don't want to see that here. Those images are very vivid in our mind when we hear about these shootings. And I think what happens is we get desensitized to it as a society. It's going to sound horrible, but when you hear about a school shooting, is it one of those where someone just shot, a few rounds in the building, or is it one of those bad ones? And we always kind of hold our breath, hoping that it's not one of the bad ones. But we've seen so many of these bad ones. It's just got to be a time for us to go and make a change as far as society goes. And other countries have done it. We've seen Australia do this.
Mhm.
Again, it's just changing that mind frame and kind of getting, unfortunately, the NRA as far as out of the politics of the conversation. We got to start somewhere. We got to at least be able to go and talk about it.
Thank you very much for coming on and talking to us about this. And, I'm sure that it's not easy to talk about having been in Iraq and talk about guns. And I very much appreciate that you are willing to, for the sake of this, moving the legislation forward.
No, I appreciate you having me. And again, it's a topic that we all have the right to go and speak to. And so I encourage everyone to go and let your opinion be heard. Don't be afraid as far as your knowledge goes, as far as guns go. Everyone has a right to live in this country safely and not have to worry about what the person next to us is doing with a firearm. So, members of Congress, vote. The most important thing that we're seeing right now is if you want the NRA to get out of politics, don't vote for politicians that are basically receiving money from them. Get involved with marches. What we're seeing is more and more people getting involved in real life opportunities in order to go and kind of have their voices be heard, and marches are a great way of doing that.
Welcome back. Joining us for this segment to talk about gun violence is Chris, who is a veteran and a high school teacher. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Would you want to tell us a little bit about your service?
I'm a two-time combat veteran. I was deployed once in 2003, and then I came back and deployed again. I volunteered for a second deployment in 2004 to 2005. My deployments took me to the Middle East. I was in Iraq. That second deployment was the deployment that was pretty life-changing for me, where I ended up losing quite a few of my close buddies, as well as once we returned and reintegrated, we lost many who returned home with us. The battle was still going on inside, even though we were removed from the battlefield. But it's one of those things where, we volunteered to do what our government asked us. They asked us to go to different places and do different things. And we did them and did them well. We also had people who were not so happy that we were inside of their country and kind of imposing our will, trying to rebuild their infrastructure, trying to make commerce flow, basically removing the old regime and bringing in just different opportunities for the people in that area. So some welcomed us, some were happy to see us, and some did everything they could to try and kill us.
What kind of combat was it? I guess, of course, I've never been in combat, and so what kind of weaponry were you using? What kind of situations were you facing?
For us, many times we'd be on a job site and we were attacked by a faceless and less than visible enemy. So we were helping rebuild infrastructure. We were building bridges. We were repairing runways. We were putting in schools and water treatment facilities. And they would lob mortars, kind of like an artillery shell from several meters away, like several hundred meters away, and just kind of marching in these mortar rounds. So we wouldn't see who was attacking us, but we would know it would happen when things would explode around us. They would also take shots at us with something we call IEDs. Those are improvised explosive devices. And anytime we would convoy from one location to another, they would make different types of remote detonating explosive devices, and they would use either cell phones to detonate these explosives as we were driving by, or as we were driving over them, or as we were driving near them. They'd use potholes. They'd use garbage on the side of the road. They would try and camouflage things with piles of rocks. And occasionally there was, some small arms fire. One of the convoys that we were on, we kind of encountered one of our mechanical issues on one of our vehicles. And so we ended up having to stop. And while we were stopped inside of this town, somebody fired an RPG from one of the buildings, and they hit one of our vehicles. It went through the up armor kit in the Humvee door. It killed the soldier that was standing behind the door, and the RPG, which is a rocket-propelled grenade, it exploded inside the vehicle. The gentleman that had the RPG go through him, he did not make it. He did not survive. So they would try and do everything they could to try and hurt us or kill us or get us to leave.
I can't even imagine what experiencing that is like. I appreciate that there are other people who are willing to experience that so that the rest of us don't have to.
It's one of those life-changing events. Question, your belief in God, and you wonder what's right and what's wrong. And it's one of those things where I know for a fact one of the things that we were doing is we were trying to make it a more hospitable place by building schools, by building water treatment facilities, by building roads and bridges that had been destroyed, and seeing kids being able to go to school, seeing females, young girls being able to walk to school and get an education. It's kind of heartwarming knowing that you're a part of these things, and it's also terrifying knowing that there's a lot of resistance to such things.
Before you joined the military, did you have any experience with guns?
My father was a Marine, and He was always very, I would say, insistent that we learned how to shoot. He said, you never know when you'll need it, and it's better to have that skill early. That way, if you need it, you have it. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I had some experience with different types of weapons, different types of rifles, different types of pistols, but he didn't go overboard with it. We weren't hunters. We weren't, avid hunters who were going out to the range and shooting and using crossbows or anything like that. We were just occasionally, if you needed to protect your home, or if somebody were attacking you and you found a weapon, you would know how to use it.
Now that you have been in combat, have experienced that level of violence, what are your feelings about guns now?
I won't pick one up. If I'm picking up a gun, or picking up a weapon, it's to kill someone or something. And I'm kind of one of those oddities. I'm kind of one of those weirdos who, not only am I not thrilled with weapons, I'm a vegetarian, so I'm not really into eating too many things and killing too many things, unless you're considering killing carrots and lettuce and spinach and kale. So I really have no use for weapons. I've found ways of defending myself without having guns, and I have children who get into everything and they break a lot of things. So I feel like life is kind of better off in my world without guns being around or being easily accessible or being available. Not only that, but also being a teacher, I'm kind of happier when people aren't shooting at me.
Since you're both a veteran and a teacher, could you tell us your thoughts about recent sort of more conservative proposals to arm teachers in the schools? I know Florida had passed a resolution to do that recently.
Well, it makes me pretty nervous, not only as a teacher, but also as a parent. I know that based on my experiences in education, very little in the teacher's room is sacred. Students are always curious about everything. What's in this cabinet? What's in this locker? What's in this cubby down here? And so it scares me to death, really, when you look at the liability and the opportunity that's there. A lot of school shootings, they can be over in 7 minutes or less. And in that 7 minutes or less, there's a lot of things that can happen. Number one, it's just so many different issues that it just blows my mind that the average citizen is saying, hey, arm your teachers, arm your teachers, arm your teachers. Teachers have their hands full already, especially when education funding has been cut and you have a class size of not 25 to 28, but more like 30 to 35. That's a lot of extra hands that you have to be aware of. You have to keep on top of things. What's everyone doing? Is there bullying going on? Is there any kind of harassment going on? Does the kid have a lighter? Does the kid have this? Does the kid have that? And then you add a gun to that. Even if you're carrying, you're going to be fully walking around. You're going to be close to the students. You're going to be, checking in on their work. You're going to be leaning close. It wouldn't be that difficult for somebody to take a weapon off of you. And then if you look at the liability issue of if there is an armed gunman who comes into your building and you happen to be the armed teacher, what are you going to do if that armed gunman ends up killing people and you don't get to the shooter in time? Are you going to be held liable for injuries that students sustained because you weren't able to physically get to that location in time? I mean, imagine a family member who is upset that their son or daughter got killed in a school shooting. They're going to be very upset, and then they're going to be even more irritated to find out that there were teachers who had weapons there at the school who could have done something but didn't because they couldn't. Generally speaking, if there's an active shooter in the building, your safest bet is to barricade your door. And once you barricade your door, then you want to start getting kids out of the building. And in 7 minutes, there's not a lot that you can do. Imagine if, just for argument's sake, you hear gunshots, and gunshots are very loud, but that sound is going to bounce off of walls. You're not going to know where it's coming from. So imagine you leave your classroom of students to pursue this shooter.